This is a recording of Financial Mythbusting with Don Bennett for Sunday, August 17th, 2014. You can listen to this program live every Sunday morning from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. right here on 105.9 FM and AM 630 WMAL.
The following is an encore presentation. Securities offered through Western International Securities Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect the views of this station. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.
You're listening to Financial Mythbusting with Don Bennett.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here. You can take a break.
And this is Don Bennett with Financial Mythbusting. Welcome. We have a great guest at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to open up and just tell you about her. Sidney Powell's going to be coming on, and she is a longtime lawyer at the Department of Justice, and she's the author of the book License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice, which is a gutsy book. And she's going to be talking about why American companies have an entirely new reason to fear the federal government, and the true stories behind some of the government's biggest headline-grabbing cases, and you want to listen to that. And again, she's going to be at the bottom of the hour, as well as, I'm going to remind everybody, I've been a financial advisor and a money manager for 30 years, so if you have any questions regarding your portfolio, you can just give us a call at 1-855-884-DAWN, and that's DAWN, and that's 1-855-884-3296, or you can become a fan of Financial Mythbusting and just like us on Facebook at Financial Mythbusting or follow us on Twitter at Don Bennett FMB on Twitter. And lastly, before I jump into this great show, I wanted to remind everybody that starting mid-August that Financial Mythbusting is going to be joining Radio America. So we are going to broadcast far and wide on dozens of stations throughout America. So if you can't get enough of me and my thoughts, then you're in luck. This show is actually going from an hour to 2 hours. It's going to be carried from 11 a.m. to noon. And again, it's radioamerica.org, so you can constantly check in there. And we're thinking mid-August. And if you can't, you can always catch the podcast of our 2-hour show on financialmythbusting.com, our website. So, our guest today at the bottom of the hour is Sidney Powell. And she, again, is the author of a new book called License to Lie. A book, by the way, that pulls no punches when it comes to talking about her former colleagues at the U.S. Department of Justice. Like I said, she's got guts. What Powell's going to describe is how the government settles an outcome and then does whatever it needs to do to try to make that outcome happen, even if that involves hiding evidence or inventing evidence or any other duplicitous and unethical type of behavior. They just want to win. So, it did kind of get me thinking about the U.S. government and its credibility. So I was reminded this week about Obamacare because something happened. But I want you to listen to this video clip, and this is from 2012, and it's a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Gruber. Now, he's considered one of the so-called Obamacare architects. And in this clip, he's explaining why the government was only providing subsidies to states. Take a listen.
Yeah, so these health insurance exchanges, once again, you go on mahealthconnector.org and see ours in Massachusetts, will be these new shopping places, and they'll be the place that people go to get their subsidies for health insurance. In the law, it says if the states don't provide them, the federal backstop will. The federal government has been sort of slow in putting out its backstop, I think partly because they want to sort of squeeze the states to do it. I think what's important to remember politically about this is if you're a state and you don't set up an exchange, that means your citizens don't get their tax credits. But your citizens still pay the taxes that support this bill. So you're essentially saying to your citizens, you're going to pay all the taxes to help all the other states in the country. I hope that that's a blatant enough political reality that states will get their act together and realize there are billions of dollars at stake here in setting up these exchanges, and that they'll do it. But, once again, the politics can get ugly around this.
Again, that was Jonathan Gruber, and he is one of the architects of Obamacare. But this week, again, we're talking about government credibility. This week, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals actually ruled that the law limited subsidies to just state exchanges, not the federal healthcare.gov, as the law itself states. So now, the U.S. government says this was merely a typo, and they always intended for everyone to have access to subsidies. But what about that 2012 video we just heard with Jonathan Gruber? That's not a typo. He came out and just said it. there's a bad thing happening to government and its credibility, and of course this video from Jonathan Gruber is just one of them. But the purpose that I have here on the show today, and to bring on someone like Sidney Powell, is to talk about, does Washington actually think that we're idiots? I mean, does the government ever think about admitting that they failed at something, or does the government failure to admit their mistakes actually undermine their credibility? I want to hear from you. I'm at 1-855-884-DAWN, and that's 1-855-884-3296. Again, this week the government was caught lying red-handed, yet they're telling us not to believe the words written plainly in Obamacare and not to believe the video I just played for you. That, again, was aired in 2012, and to only believe them. So, does the government's failure to admit their mistakes undermine their credibility? I want to hear from you. 1-855-884-DAWN, and that's 1-855-884-3296. And while I'm waiting for your calls, I'm going to talk about what I saw this week in the market. To me, this week was something about how the end matters more than the means. In the United States government today, you get this sense that there's very little agreement about what's considered right and what's considered wrong. Personally, I think it's because they no longer believe in the same values and principles that our founding fathers taught us, which is a free people cannot survive under a constitution unless they remain virtuous and morally strong. And the way I see it, the most promising method of securing a virtuous people is to elect virtuous leaders in every department. Samuel Adams, one of the founding fathers of the United States, once said, quote, "Neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt. He therefore is the truest friend to the liberty of his country, who tries most to promote its virtue, and who will not suffer a man to be chosen into any office of power and trust who is not a wise and virtuous man," unquote. If Samuel Adams was alive today, he would see that from politics to the economy, again, it just seems like the end matters more than the means. Now, given what's happened in the last 10 years, you have to wonder how the U.S. government will ever regain our trust. And I think their answer is actually quite simple. They don't feel they have to. Because through media and other forms of communication, let's just call it propaganda, the American people think that they're doing their job. And the government thinks we never lost our trust with them and that we blissfully buy into everything they tell us, especially when it comes to the state of the U.S. economy, which I believe is one of the greatest propaganda coups of our time. I mean, whether it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the White House, they have simply fleeced the American people in broad daylight to believe all is well in the U.S. economy, except it isn't. Bernanke and now Yellen's experiment in market central planning, in which a central bank's balance sheet is far more important than fundamentals, has been one of the greatest investing perversions to ever emerge in the U.S. markets. So, yes, there's been no downside risk for the last 5 years, and this is all courtesy of the Federal Reserve, where stock returns have been disproportionately skewed to the upside, and economic numbers, well, so they think, just tell us that we're in recovery. But I do believe we are starting to see a modest warning shot across the bow of what may be coming down the line. You see, this past week, the Dow Jones Industrial Average had its biggest decline in 7 weeks. And it started with the 4% decline on Visa. That's right, your Visa card. It actually lowered its full-year revenue forecast quite substantially. And remember, Visa is the largest Dow Jones component, which accounts for 8% of that index. And then Amazon also reported their ugly earnings, and due to that piece of poor news, it tumbled 10% and weighed really heavily on the NASDAQ index. And so, by the way, that was Amazon's ugliest quarter in years. You see, first it reported an earnings per share loss of 27 cents versus the 15 cents they were expecting. And this was as a net result of $126 million in net income. The operating loss was only $15 million compared to what they were expecting of $64 million. However, this appears to be the result of pulling forward revenue into second quarter, since the company also announced at the same time that the third quarter loss would be a whopping $410 to $810 million, which would be their biggest operating loss in years. But hey, don't worry. According to the propaganda spin that came out immediately, this is by the media, after they announced, these bad numbers are due to the weather. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the state of the U.S. consumer. So tongue-in-cheek there, right? And then, of course, Caterpillar came out, and they're the bellwether industrial company which we rely on, and they also reported its earnings. And interestingly enough, and I'm telling you, go back to last week, they didn't get much press coverage. As a matter of fact, they got so little, and I'm guessing the reason why is because this is pretty hard to spin 19 consecutive months of sales declines. That's right. Starting in December 2012 and continuing through today, Caterpillar has reported 19 consecutive months of declining global year-over-year retail sales. And the last and only time it had 19 consecutive months of such a decline was the period starting in October of 2008, just when Lehman filed for bankruptcy. So, this great financial recovery we are supposed to be in feels more like the great financial crisis. Too many American investors are being too easily manipulated into believing what others want them to believe. Don't be an investment victim. Start second-guessing everything, and in the process make it even harder for anyone to gain your trust until they deserve it. So, does Washington think we are idiots? Does the government's failure to admit their mistakes undermine their credibility? I want to hear from you. I'm at 1-855-884-DAWN, and that's DAWN, and that's 1-855-884-3296. And I'm going to take Mike in D.C. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm living the dream as a retired Air Force colonel. Thanks for taking my call.
Well, thank you for serving our country.
I wanted to comment about your discussion on integrity. And one of the things I found being an F-15 pilot my entire life and leading organizations is without integrity, it's impossible to lead.
Right.
And unfortunately, like you've highlighted, our government and Congress, as well as the executive branch, have basically looked at the American public and thought we were idiots too many times in a row now. They've lost my trust. I'm afraid our country is going backwards, not forwards, on everything from our international policies that are failing around the world this week to our response to the economic crisis. The unemployment numbers. I believe, although I don't have the facts to confirm this, that unemployment and people that are out of work are higher than it's ever been in our country.
No, that's true.
Yet,
that's true.
Our president claims success.
Which he did this
Can you
week.
talk to that?
Yeah. I remember hearing him say it again this week. He said there are more jobs available than any other time since 2007. Now, I would tell you that most of those people unemployed don't believe that statement, but they're still putting it out there.
It's sad.
It is sad. I wonder, do you think, Mike, that we actually are living in an age of lies? Do you think it's not just the government? Do you think it's everything?
You know, I think maybe it's more accepted to lie as long as you get what you want out of life. It's a me generation. Some of the people only worry about what's best for them and not what's best for the entire country. So, unfortunately, I agree with your statement. It's sad, though.
It is really sad. Mag, thanks so much for giving us a call. I've got Clay in McLean. Hi, Clay. How are you?
I'm great, Dawn. How are you?
Very good. You're going to have to make this quick. You've got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, so real quickly, Edelman, the PR firm, has a trust barometer. I would encourage your listeners to go to Edelman and look at it. Trust is at an all-time low. And the problem with the government is that we have a complicit liberal press who fails to communicate and write articles that outline the truth instead of the liberal spin. And so, in my opinion, as a conservative, the government has no credibility with me at all, nor does the liberal media. So, and I just hope more people are awake and listen to WMAL and conservative talk and get the real story that's going on in this government and in this world that we're in.
Thanks, Clay, for giving us a call. And to everybody out there, just remember, the more the U.S. government gets away with this kind of behavior, the more they think they can get away with it. So we can't allow them to do it. This is still our country, and the government is supposed to be working for us. So when an employee is caught lying, well, you know what you need to do. That one's up to you. Make sure you stay tuned for Sidney Powell. Again, she is the author of License to Lie, and she's going to be talking about the corruption in the Department of Justice. This is Dawn Bennett with Financial Mythbusting. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the best of Financial Mythbusting with Dawn Bennett. This program is an encore presentation.
This is Financial Mythbusting with Dawn Bennett.
I mean, the latest joke out there is that truth has become so valuable that the U.S. government has actually embarked on a conservation program. It's just ridiculous. I don't even know where this acceptance of lies by the government has come from. It's certainly not in the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution lays out exactly what the government is allowed to do. And the 10th Amendment makes it very clear that the government may not assume a right or power. If something isn't in the Constitution, then the government may not legally do it. Now, I've actually read that Constitution over and over again, but nowhere in the document is the government explicitly given the right and the power to lie to the people. It isn't there. In short, the Constitution mirrors the values of this society. Truth is required of the government. Nothing less will serve. So I want to know, how did we get into this mess? Give me a call. I'm at 1-855-884-DAWN, and that's 1-855-884-3296, and we've got Dave in Annandale. Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm good, Don. Thank you for taking my call. I agree. The government has failed horribly in presenting an open and honest administration. That's what we were promised in the beginning, and it's not happened. We have things like Fast and Furious, Benghazi, the IRS scandal with the lost emails. The list goes on, and I think the thing that we see here is that the liberal press media has covered up so much of this, but now even they seem to have lost their love of Barack Obama, because I'm seeing in certain media, Yahoo, for example, had an article today on how Obama has failed to work with Congress. And so I think even their eyes are starting to be opened. But sadly, I think, the American people have been sold a bag of goods that just, it's not been there for us. This guy didn't have the experience in the beginning, and now that's their excuse. That's the liberal press media's excuse. Well, he didn't have enough experience.
Well, I mean, tell me something. Do you think that because Obama isn't always telling the truth, like you said, Congress is starting to pick up on this, is that what's happening in other departments of the government? Are they thinking that's okay to act like that?
Oh, I think so. Why do you think we have the IRS scandal? I mean,
so it's all starting from the top. You think this is all starting from the top?
Well, I think it all comes from the top, absolutely. Holder takes his marching orders from Obama, and when they had Fast and Furious, when the Department of Justice investigates the Department of Justice, what do you think is going to be the outcome?
They're not going to find anybody guilty.
Absolutely. So there you go, and here we have the IRS. And we have Holder saying he's going to investigate the IRS. Well, he hasn't been able to find anything. Either he's the most incompetent person in the world, or he just doesn't want to find anything and has basically been told by Obama to find nothing.
Dave, I want to thank you so much for giving us a call here and sharing your ideas and thoughts about this. When a government official does lie, he or she is acting unconstitutionally and exceeding the legal limits of their office. When a government official or any official lies, they cease to be legally a part of the government in the United States. This is in our Constitution. And just as the Constitution does not authorize the government to lie to the people, the Constitution does not bind the people to accept any lies by the government or to follow any dictates by the government built on that lie. Again, this is in our Constitution. So I ask, how did we get in this mess? I mean, it's still our country, and the government's supposed to be working for us. So, I've said this before we even went to last break. The more the U.S. government gets away with this kind of behavior, the more they think they can actually get away with it. And again, I'm asking these questions because of our guest, which is coming up at the bottom of the hour, and you need to listen to her. I mean, this is exciting. She's actually got a lot of guts. She's come out. She's talking about the corruption that's happening in the Department of Justice, and you know what? She's naming names. She didn't change the names to protect the guilty. She's actually keeping the names in the book. I'm actually wondering what's going to happen to her. Hopefully nothing, and I hope the American people actually start to pay attention, and even people in the government start to pay attention to this, because, these are true stories behind some of the government's biggest cases. And I think a lot of us, including me, didn't know that this was going on. So I want you to stay tuned to this, because the American companies do have a new fear, and the fear is they need to start being afraid of the federal government, because you need to hear what they're doing to companies out there. Again, Sidney Powell is going to be with us at the bottom of the hour. You must stay with us. This is Dawn Bennett with Financial Mythbusting, and when we get back, we're going to have Sidney.
You're listening to the best of Financial Mythbusting with Dawn Bennett. This program is an encore presentation.
This is Financial Mythbusting with Dawn Bennett.
And Sidney Powell is here. Powell is one of the most distinguished attorneys in America, as her appellate experience is unprecedented. Powell has led counsel in more than 500 federal appeals, resulting in more than 180 published opinions. And if that wasn't enough, Powell is also considered one of the greatest whistleblowers in modern history. You see, Sidney just came out with a new book titled License to Lie, which discusses the corruption she personally witnessed while involved in the U.S. justice system, and it's what she calls cruel, illegal, and unethical practices being used by prosecutors and the Department of Justice. Now, Powell's book is a real-life warning about the real human cost and consequences by federal prosecutors that don't have a conscience enough to even acknowledge the suffering that they have caused, and a president that has rewarded them big by promoting them to powerful political positions. And this is where I want to begin today. Sidney, welcome to Financial Mythbusting.
Thank you so much, Dawn. It's my honor to be with you.
So why the title, License to Lie? Where did you get it?
I got it from the fact that we could not get the bar associations or the courts to do anything about this egregious misconduct, so these prosecutors are literally licensed to lie.
And so the Bar Association and the courts have turned a blind eye to these grievances. Have you filed anything against these prosecutors, or is anybody out there?
Yes, we did. Bill Hodes, who's one of the leading legal ethics experts in the country, filed grievances against former White House counsel Catherine Rumler and against Matthew Friedrich and against Andrew Weissman, who was general counsel, deputy director of the FBI. The one against Friedrich, filed in Texas, bounced like a rubber ball despite the horrific Michael Morton case that had just been resolved there, where a man was found innocent by DNA evidence after he'd served 25 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and the district attorney had become a state district court judge. That was just egregious, so we thought the Texas Bar would pay attention to that. According to the Texas Bar, our complaint didn't even state a grievance, even though it was 30 pages long and included yellow highlighted evidence the prosecutors deliberately hid for 6 years. And then the one against Catherine Rumler in the D.C. Bar just kind of wafted away. The one against Andrew Weissman, filed with the New York Bar, was held for about 14 months while he was general counsel of the FBI, and then they punted it to the Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility without even telling us they were doing that, even though the Department of Justice was defending Mr. Weissman on the charges.
You know, it sounds like there's a hidden agenda out there. Does it sound like that to you?
Yes. There was definitely an agenda to protect these prosecutors from any sort of way of being held accountable for their wrongdoing, particularly once they had been promoted to their extremely powerful positions. Mr. Friedrich was the acting attorney general for the criminal division of the Department of Justice, who micromanaged the prosecution against former United States Senator Ted Stevens, unseated him, changed the balance of power in the United States Senate, and facilitated the enactment of Obamacare, among other things. So
your book is brave for actually naming names. I mean, you didn't exactly change the names to protect the guilty.
And no, I didn't change the names.
You've got guts. And you mentioned some of the judges who actually went along with whatever the government is doing no matter what. Yet we never seem to hear about judges being impeached or otherwise tossed out. Is there any accountability remaining for federal judges? And lastly, have you heard from the DOJ since this book came out?
There has been dead silence from the other side since this book came out, which I think is damning in and of itself. Judge Kaczynski, Alex Kaczynski, who wrote the foreword for the book, actually, said he hoped people would respond. But so far, the only factual correction I've received is somebody told me I had the floor of the courthouse wrong for a particular scene.
I guess that's good news and bad news.
Right.
Good news, you're highly accurate. I mean, is the Department of Justice a political tool for whoever is in the White House?
It is. It's become increasingly politicized in the last 10 to 15 years, I'd say. I can't pinpoint exactly when it started by any means, but I can tell you that the last 10 years has done nothing but become increasingly political, a tool for the president to promote whatever his agenda is. I would like to see the Department of Justice restored to the bastion of integrity that it should be.
That it used to be.
Yes, that I feel like it used to be, and to teach prosecutors that their job is to seek justice, not convictions. People should not be rewarded for prosecutorial misconduct, and right now, Attorney General Holder's protecting I don't know how many corrupt prosecutors. The public interest group called the Project on Government Oversight, pogo.org, came out with a report that I've featured in an article at the New York Observer, observer.com, talking about the multiple hundred instances of prosecutorial misconduct, intentional and reckless, identified within the department by its own records, confirmed even by the Office of Professional Responsibility, which, as we discussed earlier, is loath to confirm any misconduct at all. And Holder won't even release the names of those prosecutors or the cases in which the conduct occurred.
Do you know the reason why he's not releasing those names?
Obviously, he wants to keep them on board there.
One of the fundamental responsibilities of a prosecutor is to charge defendants only with the conduct that is clearly criminal. And yet in your book, you speak of high-profile prosecutors in the United States Department of Justice that actually charged multiple defenders with a crime that wasn't even a crime at all, which in turn, of course, destroyed these innocent people and destroyed their lives. Why is there such a lack of human conscience today in the Department of Justice? And is this only happening in the DOJ? Are there other departments or agencies, government agencies out there that are suffering from the same unethical behavior?
I'm sure it's more widespread than the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice right now seems to be the worst because it is the largest arm of the government that can bring these massive cases against large institutions or high-profile individuals. But I'm sure it's more widespread than that. The agencies are running rampant, causing all kinds of problems for people, making up their own rules as they go.
Is there some form of reward that we don't know about that they're getting by doing this? I mean, no one seems to be stopping them. Where are their supervisors?
Right. Who's paying attention?
Exactly.
Why isn't somebody paying attention? Well, we gave Mr. Holder every opportunity to pay attention to this. We wrote and had hand-delivered to him multiple letters to bring this to his attention, and I went to DOJ and had a meeting with his immediate subordinates and got absolutely nowhere. So his statements that he would clean up the Department of Justice after he had to dismiss the indictment against Senator Ted Stevens for the egregious prosecutorial misconduct there are all a farce. I mean, it's been worse since he took over than it was before, and it was bad enough before.
So let's fast forward to today. There was this recent $7 billion settlement against Citibank, which resulted from the bank's role in misleading investors on the quality of mortgage-backed securities. Now, if they got charged $7 billion, why wasn't Fannie and Freddie co-conspirators? I mean, I'm just wondering, from your experience, what is the appetite at the DOJ to go after wrongdoing in the public sector?
Not very high at all. Fannie and Freddie deserve a full investigation and complete transparency for the taxpayers, and instead they have been protected, and the people who left there as heads, despite the disasters they caused, got $180 million between them in bonuses, I heard, which to me is unfathomable. And all that was the result of pure misconduct and corruption.
And again, even with the IRS scandal, I can't help to note that the DOJ is not even looking into that. I mean, there appears to be willful destruction of damning evidence from everything that we've seen and know so far. Do you think anyone there is ever going to be accountable?
I think Judge Emmett Sullivan, about whom I've also written at Observer.com, may very well help us get to the bottom of the IRS scandal, just as Judge John Sirica helped get to the bottom of the Watergate scandal.
Now, Observer.com is your blog, is that correct?
No, Observer.com is the website for the New York Observer
okay.
newspaper.
But you have a blog. Which one? What is your blog site?
I do. My blog is seeking-justice.org, and I'm on Twitter at Sidney Powell, followed by the number 1.
So back to your book. Your book's filled with a lot of shocking revelations, one after the other, and I can't help to think that it's really aroused a lot of reaction. Have you heard from any of your former employees?
I have heard that the Department of Justice and the U.S. attorneys hate my guts.
That's scary. And what about Congress?
Congress I have not heard from.
And you were hoping, I'm sorry I cut you off there.
That's all right. I'm hoping that Department of Justice will take a serious look at itself and make some meaningful changes, but apparently that may take a new administration to do.
And there haven't been any calls for hearings or investigations based on what you wrote?
No, not yet at all.
So
there's so many problems right now that the country is dealing with and Congress is dealing with. I mean, Benghazi, the IRS, everything.
And you think this is just going to be put on the back burner?
I don't know.
Why is it that federal prosecutors aren't ever penalized for wrongdoing?
Judges don't want to look at it. They like to believe that prosecutors are there to seek justice the way they used to be, and it's hard for them to face this, I think. It's not that they aren't willing to do something about it. It's more of a abject sort of denial problem, which is one of the reasons why I wrote the book and even called to task the judges that I think so much of, and I do. I mean, the men that I had to write about in the book and criticize, most of whom were men that I have admired for years and years, and still do to a large extent. Somebody told me the other day that one of the people in the book was one of his friends, and he just couldn't believe that she had done this. And I said, well, unfortunately, a lot of people in the book are my friends too, but if you are going to be a true friend, I think you have to speak up and hold your friends accountable. Otherwise, you're part of the problem.
You've heard of that. He who makes the rules never goes to jail for breaking them.
Yes, and I think it was the old movie Billy Jack that had a line in it, something to the effect of, if the sheriff can break the law, there is no law.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, I just want the government held to the same standards by which it seeks to hold everyone else and will send other people to jail for.
So you are, I'm sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
Destroying evidence. If any of us do it, they put you under the jail. But IRS can do it, and it's no problem. Or you get promoted because you've facilitated your supervisor's or your president's agenda. It's an outrage.
So this is what you've called this epidemic of Brady violations. Can you explain to the listeners what that is?
Yes, those are actually Judge Alex Kaczynski's words.
Okay.
He's the Chief Judge of the Ninth Circuit, and he wrote the forewords to the book in his personal capacity and spoke on it the other day at the Cato Institute, where we did a live forum that's going to be rebroadcast on Book TV and is also at cato.org on their website. But yes, Brady violations are a constitutional violation by prosecutors who have a legal, ethical, and constitutional obligation to provide to the defense any evidence that is favorable to the defense, mitigates the punishment against the defendant, or impeaches or undermines the credibility of any of the government's witnesses. The Supreme Court said in a case called Brady versus Maryland back in 1935, I think, that prosecutors have this duty to disclose evidence. They hold all the cards. They're the ones who investigated the crime scene or investigated the crime, put the case together, have access to all the witnesses. I mean, you can't refuse to talk to the government. They can put you in front of a grand jury, and you can take your Fifth Amendment rights there, but they can also put extraordinary pressure on you and even get a grant of immunity to compel your testimony. So the government has the entire deck stacked in their favor, and it's only fair that they be required to give to the defendant anything they have that shows that he's innocent or mitigates his punishment.
So this epidemic of Brady violations, has it just happened in the last couple of years, or has this been going on at the DOJ for the last 10 to 15 years?
It's probably been going on for at least 10 to 15 years, too, maybe longer than that. It's a big problem also in the states, One of the solutions I've proposed, and I know other lawyers have also, including Barry Scheck at the Innocence Project, who does this work all the time, freeing people by DNA evidence who have been wrongly incarcerated for decades, literally. It's called a Brady Compliance Order. I drafted a very clear and precise one that I'm uploading to my website, so that judges could enter it in state or federal cases and compel the government to produce the actual documents and actual exhibits that show a defendant may be innocent, because all of this is for a jury to decide. If we're going to have a jury system and trust the jury system, we need to make sure they get all the evidence. The same is true for even bench trials. Nobody can accurately decide a case when somebody's hiding the ball.
You know, Sydney, I want to thank you so much for bringing this important issue to the public's attention. And to everybody, you need to get our book. I've got it on Amazon, and but you also have a website where you sell your book. Is that correct?
I do. LicensedToLie.com. It's got the links for Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the book outlets that people can order the book from. It's also on Kindle and Nook and all the ebook websites.
And then your blog is called seeking-justice.org, and that's a source of current information about misconduct by the federal prosecutors.
Right, and watch for articles at theobserver.com.
Thank you so much, Sydney Powell, for being on the show. This is Dawn Bennett with Financial Mythbusting. When we get back, we're going to be talking more about de-dollarization going on in the world.
This is Financial Mythbusting with Dawn Bennett.
De-dollarization is spreading around the world. Here's another deal that actually got done last week, which I think, again, is going to be another nail in the dollar coffin worldwide. It's the Swiss and the Chinese central banks. They actually entered into a swap agreement. So the Swiss National Bank and the People's Bank of China reached a currency swap agreement this past week. And again, it's just demonstrating that what I've been forecasting is that China is becoming the largest economy in the world, and I do think it's going to be the next financial capital of the world when Europe and the United States don't fix their debt issues and fix their printing of money issues. And so this agreement actually between the Swiss National Bank and the People's Bank of China is actually going to allow these two central banks to buy and sell their currencies up to a limit of 150 billion renminbi or 21 billion Swiss franc. And so this deal is going to allow the Swiss Central Bank to actually invest some of its huge accumulation of foreign exchange reserves in the Chinese bond market. And remember, that money actually used to go into the U.S. bond market. So, again, this just demonstrates that China is moving in the direction to weaken the dollar by encouraging other countries to directly engage in business with them via their currency, the renminbi. So keep that in mind. It's a world we're stepping into, and it's something you have to consider for your portfolio. I also want to remind everybody that if you're interested in going to our seminar, it's July the 31st, and it's at 6:30, 7 p.m., 6:30, but it starts at 7, so we're asking everybody to come early because we'd like to be able to greet and meet you. And we're going to be talking about retirement income planning and investment management in the new economic era, and cash flow planning, which I think is very important for retiring, and, just in general, money management and financial plan development. So if you're interested in coming, it's going to be at Chevy Chase area, and it's going to be at a steakhouse there. And just all you need to do is RSVP at 866-286-2268, and that's 866-286-2268. And or you can RSVP to info@bennettgroupfinancial.com. And let us know if you'd like to come, and we will set you up. And also I want to remind everybody, too, that you still have the opportunity to purchase gold and silver coins and bars through Bennett Group Financial. And all you need to do is give us a call for that at 866-286-2268. The same number. We have a lot of people who have interest in, setting up IRAs and putting gold coins in it, not gold ETFs and silver ETFs. These are gold coins and bars. And you can either hold them, at your home, or you can set them up at a securities house that actually does that. A lot of them don't, but we do have a few that do, so we would be happy to share that with you. And again, we got into this gold and silver coin and bar business because our listeners were telling us that it was so expensive for them to go out and purchase it. So we came up with a deal with a gold and silver company so we can offer it to you at a less expensive commission. Some people were saying they were getting charged someplace between 10 and 15%, and I thought that was outrageous. So if you're interested in purchasing gold and silver coins or bars, and either just hold it at your home or put it in an IRA account, give us a call at 866-286-2268. And if you'd like to go to our seminar on July 31st, give us a call at 866-286-2268. It starts at 7, but we'd love to see you there at 6, and it's the Chevy Chase Steakhouse. And you know what? This is Dawn Bennett with Financial Mythbusting, where politics and the economy intersect.